Alrighty, so callbacks and asynchronous calls, API calls. So it does take a little bit to wrap your head around making a call, a function call, and then calling back once that function call is done. No doubt about it. But remember this, that your dev tools are still your friend, right? Where I have right here. So dev tools are still your friend because you can set breakpoints and watch this thing step through exactly what's happening. Now, part of this is obviously getting the code to work, right? But we had such good examples from Andrew that piecing together this request JS, which is what makes the call, you had a good example to do that. So referring back is totally okay, right? So in this case, abstracting out, just putting this in a different JS file is a good idea from an organization standpoint. So remember, DevTools is your friend on this as well, because it will help you see what happens. It will help you understand that when you call the to-dos in this way, passing first an undefined, because you're really not passing it, this is what's going to come back, right? Or when it comes back, it's going to pass back the error in the data. And this is the callback function itself. What will happen once you make that? So I guess that's the point is, use your dev tools to your advantage to better understand what that code is doing. And the good news is we move on. Now, we just at this week ended by, far as our code along by talking about promises. And now we do a little more promises and then we move, like I foreshadowed last week, from using the was it X XML HTTP request to using fetch. So much better, right? And using fetch with async await. Because I know this is like a really mental exercise, but once you get at least the concept of callbacks and you go into promises and then you end up with fetch, by the end, the writing it in the way of fetch and async await is so much better. Okay, so what I said last week, and I'll come back here and talk about this. What I said last week was that I was going to work on my example of the second part, right? So remembering that you have two options, or talk to me, right? I would think now is a good time because here we are coming into week 16, also coming into Thanksgiving. So now's a good time to start planning out what you're going to do. And I saw Jason talk about that. He's kind of finalizing that. So it's a good time. So I thought what I would do is finish my example, because I think in another example of using the async await with fetch, which was ultimately what I've given you the option to for your dev 2 calls for. But next week, right? Next week, week 16, you're actually going to get an experience with doing this next evolution as well. So just to look real quickly, right? So then we're going to, again, change it to fetch, callbacks to async await, create a button so that it actually brings it in at that point. And again, and you do get points for this, add some additional functionality and or output, right? Because there are different things on that this JSON placeholder API, different endpoints you can go to. Okay, so again, I think this is a good exercise. I don't give you a link to my code. My code is out there in Learn Together. As always, if you look at somebody's or my code, just say so, but attempt this on your own. That's really where you learn. It's really where you take your show on the road. Okay, so here's what I've decided. I have been thinking about, because I know it's up for us, right? So this, and if you can see this, it's API COVID tracking, which maybe at this point you're like tired of hearing about COVID. I get that too. But I thought it would be really cool. And I'm actually not going to show you all my code. I'm going to show you what my code does. And then I am going to, as I always do, but just to be clear, if you want to ask me questions about how my code is doing certain things, totally cool. Ask away. But I'm not going to show you all of it because I want you to get the experience, but I want you to have an example, another example, because you're going to have one with the hangman game. And again, with using the placeholder. One of the challenges about doing API calls on the client side. Now, I know this is only client side class, but just so you understand, as many API calls are handled on the back end. So for JavaScript, it'd be writing node code. Because when you're writing it on the server, when you're writing it on the client, there's a lot that the server that you're requesting is going to want to know and to try to protect itself. Something called CORS. So cross origin, basically not doing destructive things when you make those API calls. So you're welcome to, let me come back to this. Just know that, let me finish that thought. Just know that if you're looking for APIs to use, just make sure they do support the client side API call, because not all do. Like one I was playing with that I was going to use as an example was dark skies, which is a weather forecasting. But in my process of setting up my code, I was getting an error message, and I realized that it was because it does not allow you to use their API on the client side, only on the server side. So just know that you might run into some of that. And the reason I'm bringing this one up, this one might be a good one too that you could think about using if you're thinking of using async option 2 for dev 2. Okay? All right. So in this case, you get a lot of data for each day. And what I've done here, and I'll show you my output, right? Matter of fact, let me just refresh it real quick. So in this case, I have two buttons, number and ICU. So this, I first make the API call using async await. I get the data, then I use something called chart.js. Now, this is not to say this is what you have to do. This is just an example of me making the API call and then doing something with the data. Yours doesn't have to be this. It could be something different, right? So, but all I did is I took two of the data point. Remember, this is coming back as an object, JSON object. And so I took positive and I took in ICU. Where's it at? There it is. Currently in ICU. So the way I've done my code as well, it's modularized code to where all I'd have to do to add another button is just figure out which attribute in there I'd want to go after. So it'd be it's modular in that sense. But one of the things I want to show you, and I'm going to refresh here and look down, we'll look at the console real quick. Because one of the things is now I haven't in this case yet done the async call to the API. So I just put in here global code executed started, and then it finished. So the code as far as what is running is already done. Now the only thing that would happen is my async call, okay? And so then I made my async call, and then my async function call finished. And this idea of wrapping your head around, which is true also in the callbacks, the concept of when you're writing async code, if you're trying to do something out in the global space. So now let me come back over here. Again, I'm not going to show you all the code, but here's a general setup of my code, right? So in this case, right, my global execution. And then if you're trying to do something with the results out on the global space, you won't be able to do that, right? Because my get results is an async call. And so now these other things like my charted, which is what creates the chart, is called inside of here. So it's fine. It itself doesn't have to be an async, but it would depend on if I had async code in there. Okay. So I have the two buttons, and then But the point is that when you get results is the function call, but in general, when you make an API call and you get something back, know that if you're returning that to the global namespace and you're running another function, you will run into an issue. Because when you're running this out, like if you return, like if I call this get results, like right here, I'm calling it, and I returned the whatever the results were, and then tried to call another function out on the global namespace, it'd probably throw an error because I can't do that because async programming is completely different. It's not completely different. It is different though. Okay. And again, you'll get a little more experience with this. Ask me anything you want about this code. The chart.js was really fun to do. Chart.js was pretty simple to do. I just grabbed a CDN reference. I looked at some examples of what to do. I actually want to do a little animation. You can actually see the chart itself does a little animation when you go just naturally between things. And animation in this case, just because it's showing the data. I did have to do a little data cleanup because the data reporting started before they actually had data. So there were some null values and I had to clean those out, right? So my point is just to show you an example. And because I haven't shown you the code, you could actually use this API. The nice thing about this API is that it doesn't require any of the concerns I was throwing out or require you to do anything more than really just call it. And then there is different types of data that you can get. I just did the daily JSON, and you can go look at, let's see if I can just go, I think if I go back to just COVID reporting, let's see if I go back just here, you can see it, but you can go look at this on your own, right? So this is some of the, right? So this is the API historical data. I think I looked at just current day, but you can see that there's you can do it by state. So this is a decent one if you're interested in looking at. But more than anything, ask me questions, right? So as I said before, ask me any questions you want about how I put that together. I'm happy to talk about it. I don't want to give you the code because that's your job for this, and part of it is definitely a mental exercise. So just a few words here at the end about where we're at. And I've been kind of doing this each week, but now we're really into this last week, right? Remembering that our week 16 is abbreviated week. The item for Learn Together is thrown, as well as the attendance for this will be thrown into the following Monday. If you're not sure what I mean by that, hopefully you do though. Hopefully you sense where you're at as well. Let's go here. Let me take this off 93. So here we are coming into this week of 16. You still have your last, and this is the last week. We have the Udemy course. We're on vacation. Nothing's due during these, so we're off. Those items for this will be rolled into the following Monday, but know that there is still also the code up. And this one is your choice, right? I'm actually not going to do another video for this. This is really your choice. Just make sure when you, and the thing about this is, right? Oh, I shouldn't have done that. I really want to do this. So think about that. Once you know, and this is kind of, hopefully you know by now, by this time, which option you're going to choose on the dev, then you can go find some additional content to consume, an hour of content, code along with that. And that should help you. Again, the sooner you start working on this, the better. Okay. So I've given you my example. I talked a little about using dev tools for watching your code execute to understand the idea of callbacks. We move on to our next paradigm of async code, and then we finish. So we finish promises and we finish fetch and async await during this week. And we finished the Udemy course, which is awesome. So it is, and I've given you an example of option 2 from the dev 2, which is using fetch and async await. I haven't shown you the code, but I've shown you my output. One of the ways I handled it. I've opened up that you can ask me any questions about that. And the thing I'm going to leave you with is that, and I do have a little bit of a chest thing. It's a respiratory thing, but that's why you hear a little coughing. Maybe you hear a little lower voice today. But I am going to Tuesday, right? So here we are. We're on Friday, the 20th. On Tuesday, or on Wednesday, on Tuesday, the 24th, I will record the video for the last code review, signups, talk about that process on that day, and I will do it for both classes. I already have the schedule put together, but I will do that before I head out, which is really, again, you have everything to work through the end of this class. Okay? All right. Maybe that cleared it up. Maybe that created more questions. So have a great Thanksgiving holiday, however you spend that. And I will see you on the other side. I will record week 17 attendance the Monday following Thanksgiving, which will be here, unless I get it done over that weekend. Okay? All right. Peace out. Have a good one.